So I'll create another class, and we'll call this just variable scope, or scope. New class. Call the name will be variable scope. Again, include the main in there. So what does it mean when we say variable scope? Okay, the scope of a variable means the visibility of a variable or a function is depending on where it is being declared and defined. Okay, so in Java we have the global scope. I briefly mentioned this last time, maybe like 2 weeks ago. The global scopes are inside this class space. Okay, inside the function. See, if I take this out, you'll see that there's no function. So you have in that class space is called the global space. Okay, so inside here, anywhere here, anywhere it's outside of a function. This is the function called main. Okay, outside of that, it's called a global space. So global space or global variables. Okay, all these global variables are, you would name those exactly like we did before with those like int and double and float and so on. Okay, the same identifier, the way you name those. These have special names. Your global variables in Java have special names, and sometimes when you hear the term, you know exactly what that means and where they are located. Okay, so the most common names you will hear are called fields. Okay, if you hear the word field, that's where they are. If I say in the example or assignment, I say create 2 fields called age and number. That's where they should go. They're not inside the function, outside of any function. Okay, that's a global space. Or if I say create data members, same thing. Okay, we hit the term data members. It's also in the same as the global space. Okay, these are all globals. Or if you hit the term attributes, same thing. So all these are global variables. They are assigned or they are defined and declared in the global space. And when you declare them in here, the order doesn't really matter. I could put it in here. I put it at the bottom of my code as long as it's contained within the class. The curly brace here, as you can see. This is the opening brace, the curly brace of this class. So I could have, just say here, for example, I could say string name, right? I could put that here, I could put down here, put int age. Okay? They're all outside of any function. Then the order doesn't really matter whether your function is above or below. Okay, I can go into the function and access the name of the string and the age here. It doesn't matter where. The only time you have to concern about the order is if this variable is dependent on the other variable, then that's important, right? So if I say like something like, if I do here, int num is equal to age, right? You see that it doesn't work because it's looking above that and there's no age variable. Okay, so in this case, if num is dependent on age, then it's important to put age above num. That's the only time that you will need them to be in that order. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter. Okay? So all these are called global variables, and they have what they call global scope. So we have the term global scope. That's what they mean. The reason why they're global scope is because they're available anywhere in that class. I can have a function here, and I can access the name, the age, and the num from another function. So if you look at the big picture, it's just like these are above, and then the others are underneath it. So everything's underneath. Anything that is below them can access those. So the next one is called the local variables. Local variables are always inside a function. Okay, always in a function. What we call those methods, right? When I ask you to declare a local variable, that's what I mean. It's inside a function. and usually I'll ask you to say, create a function called calculate, and then create two local variables, sum and another number, like whatever it is, and then do something about it. So that's exactly what I mean when I say local variables. They're local means they're local only to this method here, from the curly brace, opening curly brace to the end of that curly brace, only from within this space. Okay, that function only. So if I create a variable name, same thing called string name, you see that it's completely fine because it's completely separate from the global variable name. Otherwise, we won't allow it. If we go back up here to the global space, if I create another name called string type called name, you see that they're conflict, right? Because they're in the same space. So in other words, you cannot have, I guess in the real world you can, you have two twins, for example, right? Usually kind of weird to have both that same name, but it just say that you can't, right? You cannot have two Johns or in the same household, for example, kind of like that. But of course you can. So that's what it means. This is a global space. It's a local variable local space. So that's why they are completely separate from each other, and you can have the same name in the local and in the global. Well, how you access the global and local is another story. We'll deal with that later in chapter 3 when we'll talk about classes and objects. So here I can have int age as well, int num, and they're all valid. The only difference is that 3 are local, 3 are global. Okay? So this is kind of confusing. So I'm going to rename this. Okay, so we'll call this one here. Just put the I put a local here. Local name, local age, so we can define this local num. I'm going to go down here. We'll learn this in chapter 3. I'll create another function. Okay, just a very simple one called public static, just like this one here, the main method. Public static, we'll just also call it void, and we're just going to say show, and the paren, and then you put that curly brace. Okay, so I have two functions. And I'll create a local variable. This is also a local variable. It's local to this function called show. Okay, so each have their own variables. So I'll put here int, I'll just say total here are some rules about local and global variables. Notice that these global variables, I did not assign any values, nor did I assign any values to these local variables. Okay? When you create global variables, even if you don't assign values to them, they will by default contain some default values, depending on the data type. So if it's a string, the default value will be just an empty string. Or in other words, it will look something like that. It's just there's nothing in there. It's an empty space. If you don't assign any values. If I were to print that out, you'll see that there's nothing there. Okay. In the global space here, you cannot use those system print out in the global space. You can only use that to store variables and write functions and some other we call those annotations. We'll do that later, but that's what you can do. Okay, you cannot go in here and say, I want to print out, a name. Okay, it won't work. It won't let you. Okay, just the rule, syntax rule. So you're going to print that out. You have to print that inside another function, maybe here in the main program. So notice that when I print this, when I try to print the name out, this name is blue. Again, this ID tells you that it's a global variable because the color matches. If I select that, you see that it points to this name up here in the global space. So it tells you, kind of gives you that hint. But the only thing is that this is, it will deal with the static thing later on as well. The modifier here, static. If you're running in the static, that means you can only print data that is also static. Okay, because global space variable names are not static unless you actually say static in front. Okay, again, the word static means you can access it anywhere from other class without using an object. Again, we'll deal with that later. Okay, so let's say I'm going to make all these static so I can access it. And because this is a static method, this is a static method, so you have to use static to make sure they're all accessible within your code. And just to show you the global and local space scope here. So I can print the name out. If I put the name here, you see that when you run this program, it's going to look for a method called main, which we do have, and then it will run from there. It won't call this function because we don't do any function call yet. So if I print this out, you'll see just the empty string of nothing here. So there's nothing here. It just say null. Okay. Okay, so maybe this is null. I should say, probably put null here. So there's nothing assigned to it. So notice I can access this variable name outside of the function. I can do the same thing in here. If I were just to go in here and copy that and put it in here, the second function, even though I'm not going to print it out, I can't access it yet. Notice that it allows, it's legal, completely fine. There's no problem with that. So this age up here, the default will be just 0. Because I did not assign any values, then it's going to be 0. If you were to print that out in the main method here, so go and then print that age out. Okay, you see that that's 0. If you don't assign the value to it 0, I didn't use print name. Okay, so no one 0. How about the local variables? So let me just copy this here, and we're going to print the local name. Okay, as soon as you do that, you see the red line. The IDE tells you something. Why can't you do that? That says local name may not have been initialized. Okay, so if you declare local variables, all local variables must be initialized before you can use them. Okay, that is the difference between a global variable and local variable. So here I can't just print it out like I did with the name and age. So what that means I have to do here would use something. If I want to make it empty, then I just say equal to the empty space, or put the word null here, or either one. It's fine. So that is an empty string. So once I initialize it, something, to a variable, we call that one initialization, then I can use it. Then I can print that out, even though there's nothing there, and it will be fine. Same thing, the age here, I can't just print it out. If I go here again, if I just say system.print, println, and age, you'll see the same issue, age, and it says it's not defined. No, this is the global one. It's the local age. Local age. Okay, it's not declared. There's no value. In this case, it's not. I mean, it preserves that that memory space, but there's no value in it, so it cannot run it. Whereas in the global space, it does. Okay, so it's the difference between global and local variables. When you initialize it, you can declare it this way, it's fine. If you don't use it, that's okay. But as soon as you want to use it, you have to assign a value. And you can do that from the beginning, or let's just say maybe later down the code. You only assign it when you read some data from the input that you initialize at that point, then that's okay. But otherwise, if it's not like that, you cannot use it. So I cannot just say, for example, num is equal to local age. You see that it's not allowed, whereas here I could. Okay, because local age is not declared, it's not defined, it's not set to a value. But as soon as I put that into a variable that's a 0, then that's okay. Okay, so those are the rules for local variables and global variables. It's just some little things that you want to clarify, just in case when we get to chapter 3, things will clear up much better. But for now, just know that local variables must be initialized before you can use them, whereas global you don't have to. Okay, and that is important to know. Okay, so down here, the second function here. So notice that my local number is assigned to local age, which is 0, right? So that's completely valid. So down here in this function here, I have a total of integer type, and they're all integer type. So I want to assign, if I want to assign this total to this local num here, I cannot just say local num. Okay, you see that it says cannot be resolved to a variable, local num. It's not found. What this tells you is that this local num is only visible within this function and not anywhere else. And not only that, you cannot, I cannot go into this function and then, modify this function's variables either. They're restricted, and it's like a black box that contained within that function only, so you cannot access it, you cannot change it, you cannot do anything to it. Okay, so there's no way to access that. So therefore, each function, they have their own local variable names, and they're contained within that function only, and you cannot pass that variable outside of it. Well, there is a way to do that, but not in this case. Okay, so it's not visible, as you can see here. But I can assign the total to the global, which is like age, for example. If I do that, you see that that's completely fine, because age can be shared because it's in the global space. And that's what it means. Global is global everywhere, right? I can get that variable from everywhere else. The only difference, the only thing you want to watch out for is that if I change age in here to a different value, then I'm changing the age up here, and so therefore everywhere else that age is referenced will also be changed, right? Which is nice in some way, which in some may not. If you don't want to change it, then don't put it in the global space. Okay. Another reason why you may not want to use global variable is because these global variables will not be removed from memory until you actually close the program. So if you have a lot of variables in the global space, it's convenient because you can access it, very easily. But if you have a lot of them, okay, then they consume a lot of memories. Okay, so you don't want to use that either. So only use it sparingly if you have to. Otherwise, don't put them in there. So, for example, if you use a number or something just to do a simple calculation in that function, use local variable, because once that function is done, then everything will be removed from memory, and then the memory will be restored or reallocated back to the pool. So memory management is important when you have a large application. What else do I want to tell you? Okay, so we have a global variable, we have local variables, and we also have another type called, it's like a block scope. Okay. Later on, we'll learn about if, else, and then switch, and so on. So if I have, let's just say, well, before I go that, you can also declare variables inside a block like this. So notice all of a sudden I put a block of code in here. So this is called a block scope because it's only inside the block, and it's allowed in Java. In some languages won't let you do it, but Java and a few others do, like JavaScript. Inside here, I can declare a variable called int. I can say local. Well, I'm not sure if it does. Num is equal to 12. Yeah, let me do it because it already existed. Okay, there you go. It's already existed from the. It's like this scope here is much higher than this one here is lower, and then so therefore it existed inside the same function, and they're all local. Okay, that's all local variables. So let me do it. I put here, I should say num, number or some. Num is 12. You can use for some obvious some reasons, like you can use that to do some type of calculation, and then after that you don't want to use the number anymore, release that from memory, right, back to the memory. So you would put that into a block scope. Otherwise it will still exist inside your function here. So num is 12, and I want to say something like local num is equal to num times 2, right? So I use only for that purpose. Once I'm done, once I'm out of this block of code, the num here is no longer existed. So if I were to print this out, if I say num, this is confusing. Let's change to a different number. Let's go number here, okay? Because num is actually the global num up here. So number, and then we'll put here again number times 12, and we're going to print number. Okay, so you see that once I'm out of this block, out of scope, so therefore number is no longer accessible from outside that block of code. And if I try to print that out in line 23, you see the number doesn't exist. Okay, so you have a block scope, and you use that for whatever reason, whatever purpose. And the block scope, you can see, you can have nested block scope, and then in here as well, you can go deep in that for that, whatever reason you want to do. Okay, so those only exist in that block of scope. Once you're out of it, they are destroyed, removed from memory. And this is kind of a nice feature in Java. Some languages again don't let you do that. So this is a block scope. Another one is also a block scope. Is if you have like an if block. Let's say if, let's just say that the num, which is this num up here, the global num. Okay, if num is greater than 3, for example, then you will put that if block here. And inside the if block, because again, it's that curly brace, right? It's a block of code. I can declare another variable called int x is 5. And then I can do whatever I need to do in there. Again, from this is a block of code, so I cannot access the number because number is outside of it. So if I type a number, you see that it doesn't exist, right? Okay. Only with a block. So if I say, again, I say local num is equal to local num times x, right? Once I do that calculation, I'm done. X is no longer accessible. So if I want to print the x out, you see that it's not allowed. Okay, it is removed from memory after line 26 executes, and then it wipes that out. Okay, so that's another block scope. Again, I could do a lot of nested if inside another if and so on. It wouldn't matter if I do this. I go here, put that in here. I can go here and just put that in here. Only thing is that the x has to be changed. So you can have a nested if inside another nested if, and so on. We'll talk about this later. But so we have the different scopes of here. So the block scope, the local scope, and we have the global scope, sometimes you hear the term class scope. It's the same thing. Okay, global or class scope. Or might have the term class level scope. That's what it means, inside the class space. Okay, so anything outside of a function out here is in the global space or the class level space because it's in a class, right? Everything a variable declared inside a function is are called local variables, or local to that variable only. So each function has its own sets of local variables, and so on. Okay, so those are the three main scopes that you have to understand and know what they are. Any questions? Okay. Next week when we come back, we'll talk about classes, about these fields again, and methods or functions. Okay, so if you have time, read that chapter. I will release Unit 3 if you want to work ahead. That's completely fine too. And we'll come back and we'll revisit this again a little bit. But then we'll mostly be doing with the variable names up here. You have things like we have this public and private, right? And we have the protected, and so on. So three of these, actually a couple more, but we'll go over what those means and why they are important, okay? And how to access those. Because once you start building other classes, you won't be using this static anymore. But for now, I'm just showing you that so we can access those data directly from the function here. So I made those static, but usually you will set those as non-static data type. Okay. I think that's all I have for this one, unless you have any questions for me.